Saijal, before we went to commercial break, we were discussing that perfect storm that COVID kind of created, where a lot of people were at home looking to spend, the government throwing a lot of money their way. And then what happened?
Yeah. So, as things were opening up, Tanya, people were, this pent up demand started going up and people wanted to spend. The problem was we also had to still deal with supply disruptions. Things had still shut down, right? We weren't getting the ships over from places like China, and we rely heavily on places like China for our exports. Workers weren't coming back to work. So you have a lot of demand chasing a lot of less supply. And so that's created an inflationary environment as well. And then let's not forget the wild card. All of a sudden, you have this conflict with Russia and the Ukraine. So oil prices go up, and that feeds into pretty much everything, right?
Yes.
Transfer costs or gasoline. Yeah.
Transportation was a huge disruptor. You're right. When we saw those cargo ships sitting off the coast of California, the delays to unload from the point of manufacturing to unloading a ship was just doubled, which was unprecedented. Prices were going up. And then, of course, in Canada, we saw what a huge disruption we had when they brought in the vaccine mandate for transportation. That also caused more aggravation with shipping and trucking. There were a lot of factors that kind of, as you rightly said, created this perfect storm, if you will. So with Russia, and let's talk about the oil and gas for a moment, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, how did that impact the oil and gas sector? How is that impacting us at the pumps?
Well, it obviously disrupts supply. So that's one of the biggest issues. Now we relied a little bit in Canada on Russian exports, so we can't really forget that. But there's a couple of things that factor into oil prices. One is the obvious, which is less supply, and just the geopolitical risk itself is going to raise prices of oil. So those are some of the factors, and we produce oil and gas, but we also export, and we're reliant on exports for that too. So, unfortunately, that's keeps us vulnerable.
Yeah, part of the perfect storm, I think, has been, as we've seen, there's been a lack of interest, if you will, or a lack of federal, maybe, can I say, cooperation in unlocking a lot of that energy wealth potential. And in Alberta, we see Alberta and the feds just going head to head many, many times between the carbon tax, et cetera. But let's talk about another time in history where we have seen these astronomical oil prices. And actually, we saw the last time we had high inflation. It was in the late 70s, early 80s. Inflation got to double digits. Now, we're not there yet. How did they solve it back then?
Well, let's not forget that it was Paul Volcker who was the Fed chair at that time. And yeah, he did tackle inflation, but it came at a great cost, Tanya. I mean, we went into recession, not just one, but two, back to back. The markets tanked and they stayed volatile and low for quite a long time. You saw stagnation, so not a lot of activity. And some would argue that we're still sort of paying the price for that, right? Public underinvestment. So I would say there's a couple of lessons that I think we can learn from that, hopefully. And that is, as central banks are raising rates to trying to cool the economy, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're not going to see a hard landing. So we'll see hopefully a soft inflation. Because the thing that I can get concerned about as well is the impact that this is going to have, on bankruptcies, maybe not so much job loss because, employment is pretty tight right now, the employment picture, but also what it means for underinvestment, because that's not what we need right now, right? We need money to go into things like roads and schools and housing and hospitals for our healthcare, not just for our society now, but we also have 1 million immigrants. There's backlog, so that would be my concern. If I could just make this one point too, there's a lot of focus right now on monetary policy,
right,
and what the central bankers are doing, and I would probably be the first to criticize some of the things that they did. They left interest rates way too low for way too long, creating asset bubbles in housing and the stock market. They were late to the game when raising rates. But I don't think we should ever forget about the fiscal policy. It
Okay,
might
we
not
have
be
to, I'm going to pause you there. We got to cut to commercial, but we're going to pick this up in just a moment.